A deafening bang shattered the quiet, sending echoes through the house. Screams followed, frantic, panicked, and then a heavy thud as something, or someone, hit the floor. My heart hammered in my chest while I watched everything unfold on the hidden camera feed. The bed jolted violently, the frame slamming against the wall with each tremor. That bastard shot upright, eyes wild with confusion and fear. But Anne? She was still tangled in the sheets, her face frozen in sheer terror. She knew, there was no doubt in her mind about what had just happened. The little surprise I'd left for them had finally gone off. And now? Now it was showtime. I shoved my phone into my pocket and stepped out of the car. The cold night air bit at my skin, sharp and unforgiving. The front door, unsurprisingly, was unlocked. Of course it was. They were too wrapped up in their little fantasy to worry about something as basic as security. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like they, too, were disgusted by what was happening inside. "Anne," I called out, my voice unsettlingly calm. "Did I interrupt something?" Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then the sound of footsteps. Anne appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching our bedsheet around her like flimsy armor. Her eyes darted back and forth, wild and desperate, like a trapped animal. "Alisher, what are you?" I took a slow, deliberate step forward, savoring the way her breath hitched in her throat. "You really think I didn't know?" I asked, my voice smooth and steady. I gestured toward the bedroom. "You think I didn't see?" Behind her, her little plaything peeked around the corner, half-dressed and cradling his wrist like it might be broken. Good. He deserved that much, and worse. And swallowed hard. It's not what it looks like." A cold, humorless laugh slipped from my lips. It was exactly what it looked like. And the night was far from over. She stood frozen at the top of the stairs, gripping the sheet tighter, like it could somehow shield her from the storm she knew was coming. Her eyes flickered between me and the pathetic excuse for a man hiding behind her. But guilt? Remorse? I didn't see a trace of either. No, what I saw was fear. Not fear of losing me. She'd made peace with that the moment she brought another man into our bed. She was terrified because she had no idea how deep this rabbit hole really went. I stepped closer, letting the door swing shut behind me. The soft click echoed through the house like a judge's gavel slamming down. "Go on," I said, my tone deadly calm. "Tell me it's not what it looks like." Anne's grip tightened on the sheet. She glanced over her shoulder at her lover, who was still rubbing his wrist, jaw clenched from the shock I'd rigged into the bed frame. Her voice cracked. "What did you do?" I smiled. "Oh, you mean the little addition I made to our bed? Just a harmless, pressure-triggered shock pad. A fun little reminder to make sure either of you ever forget this night." The guy stiffened, his face twisting in shock. "Are you out of your mind?" And shot him a sharp glare before whipping her head back toward me, her expression darkening into something raw and ugly. And there it was, the real her. The side she usually hid behind fake smiles and sugar-coated words. "You're insane," she hissed, her voice sharp and venomous. "You put something like that in our bed? You could have seriously hurt me." I let out a dry, humorless chuckle, shaking my head at the sheer audacity of it all. "Oh, now you're worried about the bed?" I said, my voice laced with disbelief. "That's rich. I wasn't the one rolling around in it with someone else." She flinched. Just for a second. A flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or fear, flashed across her face before she quickly shoved it down. Like clockwork, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and slipped right back into her usual act. Then I knew, the one who could talk her way out of anything, was clawing her way to the surface. This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice faltering just slightly at the end. A misunderstanding? Was she really that desperate? I didn't even dignify that with a response. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen a few times. The tension in the room thickened as I brought up the live camera feed. And there it was. Undeniable. The exact moment her lips met his. The way she clung to him, fingers tangled in his shirt, giggling like a lovesick teenager. The way she whispered his name. Matt. I turned up the volume, letting the audio play out in the suffocating silence. The breathy laughter. The soft murmurs. The unmistakable intimacy in her voice. And stood frozen, eyes locked on the screen as reality crashed down on her like a tidal wave. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking pale, almost sickly. You put cameras in the house?" she finally whispered, her voice weak, like she was struggling to even process the words. I didn't flinch. "You left me no choice." My voice was steady, eerily calm, but inside? The rage was a wildfire, burning hotter than ever. "You really thought I wouldn't notice? The late nights? The way your phone was always face down? How I suddenly wasn't enough for you anymore?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Her lips parted, like she was about to spit out another lie, another excuse, another pathetic attempt to manipulate the situation in her favor. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not this time. She was caught, dead to rights. Behind her, Matt, still standing there like a deer caught in headlights, finally seemed to shake off the shock long enough to speak. "Dude, this is between you and her." His voice was uneasy as he held up his hands, shaking his head, taking a small step back. "I didn't know she was married." Anne's head snapped toward him so fast I thought she might get whiplash. "Matt, what?" Her voice was high-pitched, panicked, not because she cared about him, but because this was slipping further and further out of her control. Matt let out a bitter scoff, running a hand through his already messy hair. "You didn't exactly mention a husband, Jess." His voice was laced with frustration, like the realization was only just now fully settling in. "I thought you were single." Oh, this just kept getting better. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway, watching as their little fantasy world crumbled piece by piece. The cracks were spreading fast, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. "So it wasn't just cheating," I mused, my tone razor-sharp. "You were lying to him, too." Anne's head snapped toward me, her glare fierce, but it couldn't mask the sheer panic burning behind her eyes. She was losing control, and I knew damn well that losing control was the one thing she hated more than anything. I took a step forward, my voice dropping to a low, deliberate growl. "Tell me, Jess, was it worth it?" She froze. Just for a split second. But that hesitation? That tiny moment of uncertainty? It told me everything I needed to know. I let the silence hang between us before nodding slowly. "Yeah. That's what I thought." Behind her, Matt had officially had enough. The reality of the situation had finally caught up with him, and I watched as he ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. The regret, the frustration, it was all sinking in. "I'm out, man," he muttered, shaking his head as if trying to rid himself of the whole mess. "I don't mess with married women." Without another word, he turned, snatching his shirt up from the floor and yanking it over his head, and spun around in full panic mode. "Matt, wait!" She reached for his arm, desperation lacing her voice. But he wrenched it free like her touch physically repulsed him. His expression twisted into something between disgust and disbelief. "Nah." His voice was clipped, final. "You're on your own." And just like that, he was gone. The front door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the house like the closing chapter of a story that should have ended long ago. And for the first time all night, the house was completely silent. I let out a slow breath, my body still thrumming with anger, but beneath it, there was something else. Something quieter. Emptiness. And turned back to me, her face unreadable. For once, there was no smugness, no performative outrage, no fake tears welling up in her eyes. Just silence. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice small. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the weight of it all settle in, before shaking my head. "Now?" My voice was eerily calm. "Now you pack your things." Her lips parted slightly, as if she had something to say, but for the first time in her life, there were no words. She just stood there, gripping the bedsheet like it was the only thing holding her together. But I saw through it. The fear in her eyes wasn't about losing Matt. He was just another distraction, a disposable thrill she could have fun with until the next one came along. No, what really terrified her was the realization that she'd run out of lies. She swallowed hard, struggling to keep up the act. Alicia, listen. I didn't let her finish. I threw up a hand, cutting her off before she could spew out another excuse, another plea, another attempt to twist the situation in her favor. No. You listen. My voice was sharp. Cold. Unwavering. This time, she wasn't going to turn herself into the victim. This time, I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of it. And from the stunned look on her face, she knew it too. You're going to pack your sh*t and get the hell out of my house. Tonight. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, she wasn't steering the conversation. I let the silence stretch between us, watching the gears turn in her head. She was calculating, always calculating, trying to figure out her next move. And then, just like that, she shifted tactics. And let out a shaky breath and loosened her grip on the sheet, letting it slip just enough to bare her shoulder. Alicia, she purred, her voice soft and syrupy, dripping with fake sweetness. Come on, baby. We don't have to do this. It was just a mistake. I was lonely. You've been so distant lately. I barked out a humorless laugh. Of course. Of course she was going to flip this around and make it my fault. Lonely? I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. That's your excuse? She stepped closer, her fingers brushing my arm, her touch as cold as her words were hollow. I still love you, Alicia. I jerked away, stomach twisting with disgust. Love? I spat. Don't insult me. You don't even know what that word means. For a split second, something raw flashed in her eyes, anger, frustration, but she buried it almost instantly, masking it with that practiced, pitiful expression. It didn't mean anything, she whispered. He didn't mean anything. I gestured toward the bedroom, voice dripping with contempt. Really? Because you sure put a hell of a lot of effort into nothing. The candles. The perfume. The lingerie. You never even did that for me. Her teeth grazed her bottom lip, the same nervous tick she always had when she got caught in a lie. But instead of backing down, she played one last, desperate card: tears. Her eyes shimmered, lower lip trembling like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Please, Alicia. Just give me a chance to fix this. I stared at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I fell in love with. Not the person I thought I'd built a life with. Just a manipulator. A liar. Someone who only cared when the game was slipping out of her control. No. The word came out flat. Final. Her breath itched, the crocodile tears vanishing in an instant. And just like that, the mask dropped. Her face twisted in rage. You're really gonna throw everything away over one mistake? One mistake? I let out a hollow laugh. And this wasn't a mistake. You planned this. Hell, you've probably been doing it for months. She didn't deny it. Didn't even flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms and curled her lip into a sneer. You think you're so perfect? Some kind of saint? You were never around. Always working late, treating me like a damn roommate instead of a wife. I took a slow breath, letting her words roll off me like water off a stone. Predictable. Every cheater played the same hand, blamed the other person, make excuses, try to justify the betrayal. But I wasn't buying it. I stepped forward, towering over her. You know what, Anne? You had choices. You could have talked to me. Told me you were unhappy. Hell, you could have just left. My voice dropped lower, colder. But instead, you chose to sneak around like a coward. Her mouth opened like she had some clever retort lined up, but nothing came out. She snapped it shut, jaw tightening as the reality hit. She had nothing left to throw at me. I jabbed a finger toward the bedroom. Get your sh*t, get out. For a moment, she just stood there, like she was daring me to take it back. But when she realized I wasn't budging, her expression hardened. Without another word, she spun around and stormed upstairs. The house filled with the angry sounds of drawers slamming and hangers scraping across metal rods. And was packing like a woman possessed, reckless, furious, spitting curses under her breath. Cursing me. Cursing him. Cursing the fact that she got caught. I sank onto the couch, elbows on my knees, hands dragging down my face as the weight of it all finally settled in. The betrayal. The lies. The sickening realization that the person I thought I loved never really existed. But the night wasn't over. Not yet. Because then? She wasn't the type to leave quietly. Upstairs, the chaos continued, zippers buzzing, fabric rustling, hangers scraping. It sounded less like someone packing and more like a tornado tearing through my life. I sat there, staring blankly at the floor, fingers tapping restlessly against my knee. This was it. The end. The woman I once imagined growing old with was now chucking clothes into a suitcase like a spoiled kid being forced to leave summer camp early. And she wasn't sad. Not heartbroken. Just pissed. Pissed that I took away her control. Then came the footsteps. Quick. Heavy. Angry. She stormed down the stairs, suitcase thudding behind her, wheels barely skimming the floor. I didn't even lift my head as she stomped into the living room, like a child demanding attention. And planted herself right in front of me, arms crossed tight, lips curling into a sneer. So that's it? You're just throwing me out like trash? I let out a slow, measured breath. No, Anne. You threw us out first. She scoffed, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. God, you're so pathetic, she hissed, tilting her head like she was pitying me. Such a victim. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with work, if you actually paid attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to. I was on my feet before she could finish, so fast she flinched. Her mouth snapped shut, eyes going wide for a flicker of a second before she masked it, pulling her face back into that practiced scowl. But I saw it. That tiny flash of fear. I leaned in just enough for her to feel it, the weight of my presence towering over her. Finish that sentence, Anne. I said, my voice low and cold. Say it. Say you needed to cheat. Say it was my fault. She swallowed hard, throat bobbing as she stared at me. Silence. I nodded slowly. Yeah. That's what I thought. And let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head like she couldn't believe any of this was happening. You know what? F this. She snapped, voice sharp with venom. I don't need this. You're just some boring, predictable guy who couldn't even keep his own wife interested. Go ahead, stand there, playing the heartbroken husband. But deep down, you know I was too good for this life. Too good for you. I smiled. She really thought that would cut deep, like she hadn't already burned everything to the ground. There was nothing left to break. I stepped aside and waved toward the door. Then what are you waiting for? Go. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my face like a predator searching for weakness. She was waiting for me to break, to snap, to beg. She wanted proof that she still had a grip on me. That even after everything, she could still twist the knife just a little deeper. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I didn't even flinch. And that pissed her off more than anything. With a sharp, frustrated grunt, she yanked up the handle of her suitcase and marched toward the door, each step radiating fury. When she reached it, she grabbed the knob and threw it open so violently that the doorknob slammed against the wall with a loud, jarring thud. She was ready to walk out of my life for good. But she hesitated. One hand gripped the doorframe, fingers digging in so hard her knuckles turned white. Her posture was rigid, tense, half-turned, caught in the space between leaving and lingering. For a second, I almost thought she might change her mind. But no. That wasn't hesitation born of regret. It wasn't second thoughts or an ounce of guilt. It was something else entirely. She just couldn't resist. One last jab. One final attempt to sink her claws in before she walked out that door. Her voice was low, steady, cutting like a blade honed to perfection. I hope you know, you'll never find anyone better than me. For a second, I just stared at her. And then, I laughed. A real, honest laugh. Not bitter. Not angry. Just pure, genuine amusement at how pathetic she sounded. I shook my head slowly, meeting her gaze without a flicker of doubt. No, Anne. My voice was calm, steady, unaffected. You'll never find someone better than me. Her body went rigid. Her nostrils flared, and her jaw clenched so tightly I half expected to hear her teeth crack under the pressure. Her fingers twitched at her sides like she wanted to fire back, to spit out something cutting, something cruel, but nothing came. Because deep down, she knew I was right. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out into the night. The door slammed shut behind her, shaking the frame, the sound ricocheting through the empty house like a final, resounding exclamation point. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door. Waiting. Like some part of me still expected it to fly back open. Like she might come charging back in with one last excuse, one last desperate lie, one final, manipulative trick to try and pull me back in. But the door didn't open. No footsteps. No shouting. No sudden, frantic apology. Just silence. A long, aching quiet that pressed in on all sides, thick and suffocating. I exhaled slowly, dragging a hand down my face, feeling the weight of everything settle deep in my chest. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, my temples pulsing with the remnants of tension that hadn't fully drained yet. This should have felt like a victory. I had caught her. Exposed her. Thrown her out of my life. So why did my hands still shake? So why the hell did it feel so damn empty? I turned, my eyes landing on the couch, the same couch where we used to sit together, laughing at bad movies, eating greasy takeout, and dreaming up a future that, looking back, was never real. Without thinking, I dropped onto the worn cushions, elbows on my knees, hands clasped tight as I stared at the floor. Everything was different now. And for the first time, I had no idea what came next. The silence in the house was suffocating. And was gone. The whirlwind of shouting, accusations, and slamming doors had settled into a hollow stillness. No more sharp click of her heels on the hardwood. No more sickly sweet perfume lingering in the air. No more fake laughter filling the empty spaces. Just silence. I sat there, eyes unfocused, the weight of it all pressing down like a slow-moving wrecking ball. I should have felt relief. Hell, I should have been celebrating. I caught her. Exposed her. Threw her out. But all I felt was empty. My gaze drifted toward the bedroom door at the top of the stairs, our bedroom. Or at least, that's what it used to be. Now it felt like enemy territory. The crime scene of my marriage. The sheets were still twisted into a chaotic mess from when they scrambled out of bed. The candles Anne had lit for her little affair flickered weakly, melted wax pooling onto the nightstand. And there it was, that goddamn bottle of my cologne. The one she sprayed to make it feel like I was there while she screwed him. My stomach twisted, bow rising in my throat. How long had this been going on? I searched my memory, grasping for the red flags I'd brushed aside. The late nights, the half-baked excuses about girls' nights, and work events. The way her phone was always face down. The constant texting when she thought I wasn't looking. How she'd recoil when I tried to touch her, throwing out some tired excuse about being tired or stressed. God, I'd been a fool. I leaned forward, running both hands down my face, trying to push back the burning rage crawling through my veins. She hadn't just cheated. She'd lied. She'd planned it. And worst of all, she'd enjoyed every second. And now? She was probably already out there spinning the story, painting herself as the victim. A sharp knock at the door yanked me out of the spiral. My whole body tensed. Did she come back? I shoved myself off the couch, fists clenching on instinct. If she thought she could waltz back in here and twist the knife any deeper, she was dead wrong. I yanked open the door. But it wasn't Anne. It was Matt. His face was tight, jaw bruised, probably from when my little shock pad sent him flying into the nightstand. He stood there like a scolded kid, hands stuffed into the pockets of his worn jacket, shoulders hunched against the cold. Almost like he was ashamed. I crossed my arms, planting myself in the doorway. You've got 5 seconds to explain why the F you're here before I throw you off my porch. Matt exhaled sharply, shifting his weight like he was trying to decide if this conversation was even worth it. Look, man, I didn't know she was married. I scoffed, folding my arms tighter across my chest. Yeah? That makes it so much better. Matt shook his head, jaw tightening. I mean it. She told me you were just some ex who wouldn't move out. Said you were hanging around, refusing to let go. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Of course she did. That lying, manipulative BCH. Guess we both got played, huh? Matt muttered, eyes dropping to the porch like he couldn't look me in the face. I studied him for a moment. He looked shaken, not as wrecked as I was, but rattled enough. You still F her? I said bluntly. He nodded, lips pressing into a thin, regretful line. Yeah. And if I'd known? I wouldn't have. I don't do that F, man. I don't mess with married women. Every nerve in my body begged me to break his face, to make him hurt like I was hurting. But the truth was, Matt wasn't the one who made vows to me. And did. Matt shifted awkwardly, like standing there any longer might get him punched. Look, I felt like I had to come here and say it. That I didn't know. And that I'm sorry. I stared at him, my eyes searching his face for even a flicker of bullshit, some tiny sign that he wasn't as clueless as he seemed. I searched his face, waiting for the flicker of denial, the flash of defiance, anything that suggested he thought I was wrong. That he still believed whatever bullshit and had fed him. But there was nothing. Just a slow, dawning realization settling into his features like a storm rolling in over open water. He actually believed it. He knew. And yet, it didn't change a damn thing. I shook my head, exhaling sharply as I stepped back into the doorway, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Whatever, man. She's your problem now. Matt's brows pulled together, confusion knitting itself across his face. What do you mean? I almost laughed. Was he really that dense? Or was this just that last pathetic thread of hope, fraying right in front of me? I smirked, cold and sharp. The kind of smirk that cut deeper than a blade. You think you were the only one? That you were special? I took a slow, deliberate step forward, lowering my voice to something razor-edged. Something that made the truth feel even sharper when it landed. She lied to you the same way she lied to me. And when she gets bored? She'll move on to the next guy, just like that. I snapped my fingers, the sound slicing through the thick, suffocating silence. And Matt? He felt it. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, the weight of my words pressing against his chest, making it harder to breathe. I could see it now, the slow, crushing realization creeping in, winding around his ribs like a vice. Maybe he thought he was different. Maybe he thought he mattered. Maybe he actually believed she cared. But now he knew the truth. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, to deny it, to find some way to salvage the lie he'd been living. But he didn't. Because he couldn't. Yeah, he muttered after a beat, nodding slowly, his voice hollow. I guess you're right. And just like that, it was over for him too. He took a step back, shoving his hands deep into his pockets, like he was trying to hide how much they were shaking. Take care of yourself, man. His words were empty. Just noise. I didn't bother responding. Just shut the door in his face. The latch clicked into place, the final, quiet punctuation to the absolute mess of a night. For a moment, I stood there, forehead against the wood, exhaling slow and steady, willing my fists to unclench, my jaw to relax. This should have felt like a victory. And was gone. Matt was out of the picture. But I still had one last thing to do. The final nail in her coffin. The house was finally quiet. Too quiet. No shouting. No fake apologies. No and slamming doors and spewing excuses. Just me. Me, the slow tick-tick-tick of the kitchen clock. Me, the faint hum of the refrigerator. But my mind? My mind was a goddamn war zone. Memories crashed like waves against my skull, relentless, merciless, tearing through whatever fragile sense of calm I was trying to build. The laughter that wasn't meant for me. The whispered name that wasn't mine. The way she used to look at me, like I was everything, until, one day, she just didn't. I clenched my jaw, pushing off the door, forcing my feet toward the kitchen like movement alone could shake off the weight pressing down on me. I grabbed the half-empty beer from the counter, but it had gone warm, the bottle slick with condensation. Didn't matter. I took a sip anyway, letting the bitter taste ground me, anchor me, remind me that I was still here. That she wasn't. That it was over. Really, finally over. And yet, as I stared at the empty space where she used to be, where we used to be, I couldn't help but wonder. Why the hell did it feel so damn empty? I sat at the dining table, my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the screen. The messages were still there, buried in that secret folder she thought I'd never find. Dozens of them, texts, photos, voice notes, proof of everything. Proof of her lies, her sneaking around, the twisted little games she played. She didn't just cheat on me, she turned my whole life into a joke. I tapped on a message from a few weeks ago, the one where she mocked me, laughing about how easy it was to deceive me. He actually thinks I'm at yoga right now, she'd written, followed by crying laughing emojis. Told him I was working late again. He just nodded like a good little husband. What a joke. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I could have ignored it, let her fade into whatever miserable life she was about to create for herself. But she didn't deserve a clean break. No, she deserved to burn. I opened my laptop, typed a quick, calculated email. One attachment. No threats. No dramatics. Just cold, hard proof. Subject: your employees conduct. Hello? I wanted to bring something to your attention regarding an last name. Attached, you'll find messages that detail her repeated dishonesty regarding her work hours, including using company time and resources to facilitate an affair. Given the importance of integrity in your workplace, I thought you should be aware. Best, Alisher last name. I read it twice, my pulse steady. No rage. No begging for karma. Just the truth. And that truth? It was lethal. I attached the screenshots, hit send, and leaned back in my chair. Done. She had used me, lied to me, and disrespected me in every way possible. Now she could watch everything she built crumble, just like I did. But I wasn't finished. And wasn't just an employee. She was a social butterfly. A master at maintaining appearances, making people think she was perfect. Friends, family, colleagues, they all bought into her act. Time to peel back the mask. I opened a group chat, one that included her closest friends, some of whom I'd known for years. I pasted the same screenshot and added a brief message. Thought you should all know the kind of person and really is. I won't be responding, but now the truth is out there. Do whatever you want with it. Then I left the chat. I shut my laptop, exhaling slowly. My hands weren't even shaking. It felt good. She spent months, maybe even years, chipping away at me, making me feel insignificant, like a complete fool. But not anymore. I got up, walked to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and popped the cap. Taking a long sip, I let the bitterness coat my tongue, grounding me in the moment. Then my phone buzzed, and I smirked. That was fast. I let it ring. A few seconds later, a text came through. Then another. And another. The preview flashed across my screen, each message more frantic than the last. Alisher, what the F did you do? You're ruining my life. Answer me. I chuckled, shaking my head. Ruining her life? She did that all on her own. The calls kept coming, 5, 6, 7 times. Finally, I picked up, put her on speaker, and set the phone on the counter. Silence. Then heavy breathing. And then, pure, unfiltered rage. You piece of SH! She shrieked. What did you do to me? I took another sip of my beer, savoring the meltdown happening on the other end of the line. I just told the truth, Jess. That's all. You got me fired, Alisher. Do you get that? Fired. I raised an eyebrow. Damn, that was fast. You think this is funny? She spat. You just had to be a petty little BCH because you couldn't handle a tiny mistake. That made me laugh, an honest, deep laugh. A little mistake, Jess? You weren't just cheating. You were bragging about it. Laughing about it. Her breathing turned sharp, probably pacing in whatever dump she was holed up in. You really think you're the good guy here? You think people are gonna take your side? I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. Doesn't matter, does it? Your boss did. Silence. Then her voice dropped low, dripping with venom. I swear to God, Alicia, I'll make you regret this. I smiled. There it was. The real her. No fake tears. No empty apologies. Just pure, furious and... Too late, I said, calm as ever. I already regret ever meeting you. And then I hung up. The second the call ended, my phone exploded with texts. And pick up the FING phone. And you think you're done? You're not done. And Alicia. Answer me. Now. I swear, Alicia, I will ruin you. I smirked, taking another slow sip of my beer. Oh, sweetheart, you already did. Now it's your turn. Without another thought, I put my phone on silent and leaned back against the counter, exhaling slowly. The anger was still there, simmering beneath my skin, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I had taken my shot, the damage was done. And she knew it. Minutes passed. Then, a knock at the door. I didn't move. Another knock. Louder this time. Then banging. Alicia! Open the goddamn door! I sighed, pushing off the counter. Here we go. When I swung the door open, there she was, and, hair wild, face flushed with pure fury. She wasn't the carefully composed woman she pretended to be. She looked completely unhinged. You think this is funny? She spat, shoving her phone in my face. The group chat was still open, flooded with messages from people who had finally seen through her bullshit. Wow, Jess, really? I thought we were friends. I can't believe you did this to Alicia. You lied to all of us. She was losing everything. I crossed my arms, completely unfazed. Didn't think I'd actually fight back, did you? Her nostrils flared. You had no right! I laughed, a deep, bitter laugh. No right? No right, Jess? I stepped forward, lowering my voice. You brought another man into our house, our bed. You didn't just cheat. You mocked me. Lied to my face. Made a FING joke out of me. She swallowed hard, but the fire in her eyes didn't dim. You destroyed my life over one mistake. I shook my head. No, Jess. You destroyed your life. I just made sure everyone saw it. Her lip curled. You think you won? I exhaled through my nose, tilting my head. Did I lose? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because she knew. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched into fists. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, desperately trying to find one last way out. Then her face shifted. Softened. Her eyes glistened. Her lip trembled. Alicia. I loved you. I stared at her, really stared at her. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt nothing. No pain. No anger. Not even satisfaction. Just nothing. No, I said evenly. You loved having control. You loved knowing you could lie and get away with it. That's not love, Jess. That's just who you are. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but I wasn't buying it. She wasn't crying because she lost me. She was crying because she lost control. And now, she had nothing. I took a step back and nodded toward the driveway. We're done here. Her jaw clenched, but she knew she had no cards left to play. She turned, storming down the steps, heels clicking hard against the pavement. But then, just before she reached her car, she hesitated. Spun around. Her eyes burned into mine. You're going to die alone, Alicia. I smirked. At least I'll die with my dignity. Her face twisted. But she didn't say another word. She just yanked open her car door, threw herself inside, and sped off into the night. The second her taillights disappeared down the street, I let out a long breath. My shoulders relaxed. My fists unclenched. It was over. Stepping back inside, I locked the door behind me. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The house felt different. Lighter. Like it had been suffocating under a thick, invisible fog that finally lifted the moment and was gone. I stood in the entryway for a moment, just listening. Silence. No more fake apologies. No more lies. No more A slow breath escaped me as I ran a hand down my face. It was over. Really over. I walked back to the kitchen and reached for my beer, but it had gone warm. Didn't matter. I took a sip anyway, leaning against the counter, finally letting the exhaustion settle deep into my bones. The past 24 hours had been a storm of chaos, betrayal, confrontation, fallout. But now, there was nothing left to fight. Nothing left to prove. And for the first time in a long time, I was in control. My phone buzzed against the counter, the sound slicing through the thick, oppressive silence that had taken root in the house. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind of stillness that settled deep, pressing in on all sides, making everything feel heavier than it should. I glanced down, expecting the usual, a spam email, a calendar reminder, maybe a half-hearted meme from a friend trying to lighten the mood. But instead, the screen was lit up with a flood of notifications. More messages. Some were from mutual friends, their words carefully chosen, laced with concern, testing the waters before diving in too deep. Others came from people I hadn't spoken to in ages, offering their support in hesitant, tiptoeing phrases, their shock evident even through a screen. And then there were the ones from Anne's so-called friends. Those messages stood out for a different reason. They weren't filled with warmth or genuine sympathy, just a manufactured sense of disappointment, thinly veiled judgment wrapped in artificial shock. I used to care what they thought. I used to waste energy on the politics of it all. But now, I didn't have it in me to pretend anymore. Their words felt empty, like echoes of a conversation I was no longer a part of. But one message pulled my focus, cutting through the rest like a beacon in the fog. "Mom, I heard what happened. You okay?" Simple. Direct. No sugarcoating, no unnecessary fluff, just a question that carried more weight than she probably realized. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, as if waiting for the words to change. As if reading them enough times might rewrite reality, might somehow take back everything that had unraveled. But no amount of staring could undo what was already broken. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, slow and steady, as if exhaling the tension knotted in my chest. Then, finally, I typed back. "Me, yeah? I will be." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually believed it. I set the phone down with careful deliberation, as if placing it too hard might shatter whatever fragile resolve I had left. Pushing off the counter, I dragged my feet into the living room, the air thick with memories I wasn't sure I wanted to confront. I sank onto the couch, the same couch where Anne and I used to sit, our legs tangled together, pretending everything was fine. We had convinced ourselves the cracks weren't there, that if we just ignored them long enough, they'd disappear. But they had always been there, beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to split everything apart. The echoes of those moments still lingered, woven into the fabric of the place. The way the cushions still held the faint imprint of where she used to sit, the way the air still carried the ghost of old conversations, old laughter, old fights. But this time, the memories didn't have the same sharp edges. They didn't cut the way they used to. It wasn't that they had lost their weight, it was that, finally, they weren't mine to carry. They belonged to a different version of me, to a past that no longer had a claim on my future. And was gone, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. And strangely, I found myself thankful for that. The lies. The betrayal. The constant, crushing weight of all the things she had done, all the things I had once carried so willingly, none of it was mine anymore. It was hers now. And I was done holding on to it. As I sat there, staring at the empty space where she used to be, I felt something settle in my chest. It wasn't relief, not exactly. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, something more certain. I wasn't broken. I wasn't some wreckage of a man, drowning in the aftermath. I was free. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of my lips as I leaned my head back against the couch, closing my eyes for a moment. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'd start fresh. There would be new challenges, new battles to fight. But I'd face them with a clear head and a steady heart. But tonight? Tonight I'd sit here, drink my beer, and enjoy the beautiful, perfect silence. The kind of silence that meant I was no longer trapped in the chaos she had left behind. It was mine now, and I was going to savor every single second of it.